Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
Hi, I'm Gillan Hawkes. I'm Vice President of Product and Analytics at 6 River Systems, and you're listening to the New Warehouse podcast, and here is my warehouse safety tip. So whenever associates or people in a warehouse are around collaborative robots, they must be trained to know where the emergency stop button is in case they need to stop robots immediately and quickly. Just a great safety tip to make sure everyone is safe.
With e-commerce off the charts, many small and growing warehouses are asking, how can I get ahead when my warehouse is barely keeping up? The answer is future-ready warehouse tech from Zebra Technologies. Warehouses can simplify and upgrade all processes, from automated inventory management to hands-free picking, with Zebra's tailored, scalable mobile solutions. They're simple and intuitive. There's never been a better time to upgrade for success with Zebra. How can your warehouse get ahead? The answer's in black and white. Get the answers at zebra.com/theanswer. That's zebra.com/theanswer. Fulfillment demand continues to skyrocket and outpace available labor. To keep up, warehouse operators are turning to flexible fulfillment solutions like 6 River Systems. Utilizing 6 River Systems' award-winning combination of collaborative robots, artificial intelligence, and operational expertise will make your associates and wall-to-wall fulfillment workflow more efficient. No new infrastructure, no change to warehouse layout, easy to deploy and scale, easy to train and retain associates, all at half the cost of traditional automation. Want to take your fulfillment operation to the next level? Go to www.6river.com to learn more. That's www.6river.com to learn more.
The New Warehouse podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse podcast, bringing you a new episode today. On today's episode, I am going to be joined by Gillan Hawkes, and she is the VP of Product and Analytics at 6 River Systems. Gillan's going to talk to us about Omnichannel and how robotics and automation fit into the Omnichannel story. We're also going to talk a little bit about making sure that we are mindful of safety when we're trying to reach our productivity goals. And we're also going to talk about prepping for the 2020 peak season and some more about robotics and how things will kind of transform with the way consumer behavior has changed and how customers will start to be seeing robots being utilized more in their retail experience. So, Gillan, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Yes, happy to have you on. I think I actually only ever had Fergal on the show from 6 River. So,
well, this is a step up then. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, wow. Okay. He's going to be listening to this, So.
I love you, Fergal. Don't you worry.
So I guess before we get started, so since we've, heard the description of 6 River Systems from Fergal a couple of times, why don't you give us just a brief overview of 6 River from your perspective?
Yeah. So 6 River Rewind was all about enabling picking in a warehouse environment. Mm-hmm. But that's something that's a nugget from which we have grown into really having full solutions, both software and hardware, to help automate fulfillment everywhere. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we mean by fulfillment everywhere, but just a little sneak preview. It's really everywhere in a warehouse and every different kind of warehouse that exists out there now, which we know are things like stores, empty mall spaces, and more places where you can get customers their product quickly and easily. So I think our definition of where fulfillment is happening is broadening. And so 6 Rivers is all about broadening and stretching our capabilities to help our customers meet their customers, i.e. the consumers, changing and evolving needs.
Okay, interesting. And I will say, well, I'm not going to say you did better than Fergal. I think it's just an interesting perspective to hear from a different angle as well. So, we were going to talk about, and you mentioned in here, kind of the different ways that consumers are purchasing things now. So, we'll talk about omni-channel fulfillment is a big thing that's been, a topic of discussion and a shift in the way we kind of do business over the past few years, especially with the pandemic, as well as kind of pushed a lot of customers that maybe are strictly B2B into B2C as well, and kind of diversified that. But before I guess we get into a deeper discussion about the omnichannel, why don't you just give us, just for those that may not be familiar, what exactly is omnichannel?
And my background is actually omnichannel. So I spent 15 years of my life in omnichannel from a retailer's perspective. So it's my passion, and I am, I guess I would argue back to you, Kevin, that omnichannel is not anything new. And not that you were saying that, but omnichannel has been out there for a while. And I think a lot of forward-thinking retailers, saw the opportunity, and some of the more maybe, dare I say, laggards or retailers who just didn't, weren't making it a central pillar of their investment, are now catching up thanks to COVID in terms of understanding to now answer your question about what omnichannel really means. I mean, basically it means that the consumer's in the driver's seat about how and where they want to both order and receive or pick up their product. They want to do it wherever the heck they want to do it on their terms, right? And so and that means getting product faster, within hours rather than days. It means giving them the option to actually them go get it if they think that's more convenient, and for them to be able to order on multiple, commerce or social media platforms, order in a store, order online, order on the go. Basically, as I say, it's buyer's choice at this point as to how they want to interact and receive product from brands and retailers. And brands and retailers are waking up to knowing that that's the table stakes for them these days. And so there's a lot of investment going on in many, many different spaces that we'll talk about how they are going to do that and how they are going to meet these pesky customers' demands.
Yes, the customers can get pretty pesky sometimes. And
I'm one of them, so I know.
Yeah, me too. We're all a customer at some point, right? Exactly. Yeah. So, with the omnichannel, I mean, talk about some retailers you mentioned kind of maybe lagging behind in diversifying the abilities at which their customers can purchase their products and the accessibility to do that. So I'm curious, with the pandemic recently, how much do you think it's accelerated maybe some retailers' plans to go more diversified in the points of sale?
It definitely has accelerated it simply because, and I guess I would back up and say, where does the acceleration need to start? And I think it all starts with inventory availability and that single view of inventory, because of old, it used to be that, retailers would spend a heck of a lot of time trying to figure out what inventory they're going to push out to their, network of hundreds, possibly thousands of stores, and then what inventory they're going to hold back into their warehouse and kind of guess where that demand is going to come from, because they were only able to fulfill from a warehouse. But, clearly that left them with huge inventory inefficiencies, because you'd have stuck inventory in stores. And going back to your question, how has the pandemic impacted that inventory? Well, clearly foot traffic to stores fell through the floor, right? And so any of that inventory that was pushed out to stores was stuck there, and just basically a ticking nightmare for retailers. So the investment to go back and to say, look, we can push out inventory to anywhere in our network, stores or warehouses, but we can still use all of that inventory and surface and show that inventory to online customers to ensure that we can get and close the sale and actually fulfill it from a store if that's more convenient and cost effective for me to do so. And so it starts with one inventory, one view, which is the anchor from which then you can enable a bunch of other different omnichannel capabilities on top of it. And I think a great example of who's kind of leading the charge here is Target. I think, a great quote from their chief supply chain logistics officer is that, he would say, And I'm going to read the quote here because I think it's a really good one. 2 words is one, inventory is the key to success, and a unified inventory strategy is the anchor and the catalyst for Target's success in their growth of digital. And I think the other data point that I think they shared, in their recent results was that they've basically fulfilled upwards of close to 3/4 of their online demand has been fulfilled from their stores.
Wow.
Right. But to do that is incredibly difficult, right? And we can figure out and talk about how they've, through that one view of inventory, how they have efficiently used that inventory to fulfill direct to consumer orders, probably more quickly, and then maybe more efficiently net. And that's where automation can help make that efficient. It is convenient, and it could cut down on the logistics cost of fulfillment, but the labor side of that equation in stores is, I think, where further investment is needed to make sure that order is picked and packed efficiently in a store environment as it is efficiently in a warehouse environment. And there's gains to be made there.
Definitely, yeah. And I think it's interesting that you pointed out Target there because, for me, my career is in the warehouse as a warehouse manager, and I remember kind of towards the beginning of COVID, I remember going into a Target because I think I was trying to find wipes, like disinfectant wipes, and I was just going
doing everybody else, right?
Yeah, like every store you can imagine, right? And Target was one of them, and I remember going in, and I see the employees like picking orders, and I remember thinking like, oh, am I in a warehouse? Like, what's going on? And then I started to read, like you were mentioning some of the stuff there about how they're fulfilling all these orders from the store because they're doing like the curbside pickup and they're doing the delivery. So it's really pretty amazing how they've been able to pivot and do those types of things. And you see them, actively, doing it. So people are utilizing the service heavily. But you mentioned something there at the end about, utilizing the labor more effectively. So I think that's kind of where, robots and automation come into the story, which, we've obviously seen more adoption of in the, typical warehouse and fulfillment distribution center atmosphere. But how does that concept of utilizing robotics and automation for fulfillment, I guess, transfer from the, typical concrete building to the retail center or the retail store?
Yeah.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
I think it's very similar to some of the warehouse kind of current picking methods that we often go in and help customers address, which is a lot of the picking just happens really with a piece, paper picking and a manual cart. Right. And certainly in a warehouse environment, there are huge economies of scale to be able to automate that more. Right. And you can invest in robots and other automation systems to gain efficiencies at the scale that is happening in a warehouse for replacing a paper and a manual cart pick. Now, obviously, in the store environment, you're dealing with a couple of very important differences. One is volume, right? Volume is never going to be as high as it is in a warehouse, right? You just won't have the amount of volume available to pick in a store. Two, you're dealing with a very congested, and could be a congested live environment with, if you've been in Target, it's, children, it's dogs, busy. It's everyone running around, right? And so there are added complications to a physical live store environment for putting automation in that can be challenging. But I think it is a big enough opportunity that people like 6 River are really spotting and understanding that we can take what we've done in warehouses and stretch it tweak it, customize it for those environments. And two examples there would be, one, can you get a robot to work safely in a uncontrolled store environment and be moving around regular customers rather than trained warehouse associates? It's a challenge. It's not an insurmountable one. So live store robots is going to be a thing. But possibly that takes care of one of the challenges. The other challenge is a robot is a fairly sizable capital investment, right? It's not millions of dollars, but it's also not, hundreds of dollars. It's somewhere in between. Yeah. So we realize that in some cases, if the volume is insufficient in the store, or if just simply the physical space of aisles in store isn't conducive to a robot like our Chuck at Six River, we can't count on using Chuck to do the fulfillment. But what we can count on is our smart software to help pickers pick the right product and find the right product and fulfill it easily. And we're going to do that by abstracting our software off of our robot and simply making it available on a handheld device, which is more cost effective. Definitely doesn't have any, congestion issues in narrow aisles, but it gives the power of the ability to pick quickly, efficiently, and accurately to a store associate in a safe, cost-effective, efficient way.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think that it will be interesting to see how robots start to come into that space for the fulfillment side, because I have seen some like cleaning robots in stores, and then also seen the robots that are, I guess, doing some stock taking and looking at what's on the shelves as well. One challenge, I think, and I'm curious what your thoughts about this as an inventory control guy background, always concerned about, you mentioned there, making sure that things are in the right place. And with customers in the store,
those pesky customers like to move
they
stuff
like
around.
to pick something up to look at it, and then for whatever reason they like to put it like 3 shelves below where they picked it up from, or on the whole other side of the store, or as you mentioned, the kids running around, they like to just pick things up, and then mom or daddy likes to say, no, we're not getting that, and they just put it down somewhere. So how do you think that challenge can be navigated with something like the smart software, or how do you think that can be like overcome?
Yeah. So those are two real live use cases that my team has tackled full on here at Six River.
Okay.
And yes, the third challenge that you quite rightly articulated that I didn't spell out earlier is that inventory accuracy in a store. Yeah. I don't have the data, but way less than it is in a well-run warehouse.
Imagine.
And that's because those pesky customers are actually buying stuff off the shelf as well as moving stuff around. I did it myself in Target yesterday. I dumped something at the last minute when I decided I didn't want to buy it, and I didn't do the nice thing and put it back where it came from. So, but in all seriousness, two things that we've done to address that and to recognize that that's just another factor in that live store environment that we have to deal with is two things. In the software that we have built for this handheld version of our software, we've built in the ability for the picker to do two things. One is if they get to the location that was supposed to have, let's just say, 2 pink t-shirts, and there's only one there, we have enabled the software to actually say, okay, if it's not available at the second one, if you're not able to pick the full order at this first inventory location, if there is another inventory location somewhere on an end cap or somewhere else in the store, we will direct the picker to that next or alternative pick location to see whether they can fulfill it. And then we will tell them where it is, and we will guide them to it, right? So that the associate knows where they're going, and we can get them there quickly. The other thing that we will do is, let's just say that following that example, we get them to the second location for the second t-shirt, and gosh darn it, it's not there either. That at that point, we will have enabled what we would call substitution of product. And maybe my pink t-shirt example is not the best, because if you want a pink t-shirt, you're not going to settle for a blue one, for heaven's sakes. But imagine that you could allow the picker to substitute a product. For instance, like if it was instead of a t-shirt, mayonnaise, could you substitute a different quantity or size of a mayonnaise jar or something like that, so that you give the picker a couple of different tools in their toolbox to be able to fulfill that order, dealing with some of these inventory kind of challenges that are very real in a store environment. And that's two ways that we've sought to mitigate it for that scenario.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's smart too, because, a lot of times, even in my dealings with some warehouse softwares, there's like not really other options. Like it's just like, oh, it's not there. Okay, market short. And then
Market short, right? And then you're dealing with a whole bunch of companies.
Yeah, this whole other process of researching it and then
Yep.
trying to figure out what happened. And there is a location, so we can pull it from there. But it's a lot more steps than I guess the options that you're giving them. So that's really smart. The other thing that you mentioned in there too was dealing with, I guess, robots and customers being in the same place, which may be a challenge from a safety perspective as well, but also from a safety perspective going back into the DC when we look at trying to meet productivity, but also meet our safety goals, which, safety should always be number one. We still have those issues where we tend to rush because we want to hit those productivity goals, or maybe we need to hit those service level agreements for customers. But, since a lot of DCs, they're seeing, spikes in demand for products throughout the pandemic, how do we kind of balance those safety needs with the productivity goals when it comes to robotics in the warehouse?
Yeah. And we did a lot of work on this, a year ago, when all of a sudden we were in COVID and we had, the double challenge of customers saying, oh my gosh, my inventory is spiking. I've got more orders than I know how to pick. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, they were very, very concerned about the safety of their employees, right, and the pickers. And so a couple of things that we did to help mitigate that, and it is a trade-off between, as you say, the safety and yet the kind of the efficiency of the system, is that we worked with customers to simulate in a simulated environment, kind of tweaking the dials between creating less efficient picking paths for the pickers to go pick, and less efficient because we were actually forcing the trucks to not be in the same aisle at the same time to avoid each other and the risk of contagion or COVID, right? So it was great. We could actually do that simulation in a virtual environment and say to the customer, look, if you really want to really dial up the safety, here's what the efficiency impact is going to be, or if there's a slightly more balanced way of balancing it and not going too extreme. But in other words, we could meet the customer where their comfort level was, and to mitigate, those two risks, performance, or sort of those two competing, if you will, things, performance and safety. So, and that's, coming out of COVID and hopefully a future state where it's just safety in general, not COVID safety, but just making sure that, the robots themselves are very aware of what it is that they see, right? Robots see things and seeing boxes on the floor versus seeing a human being is where we spend a lot of our time investing to make sure that a robot, when it sees a type of object, a person, can react in a different way than if it is a box that's on the floor in their way, and obviously less of a risk of a safety incident with a box. So, there are many ways that we work to balance performance and safety. But I think and the fact that robots in general and collaborative robots have flexibility built into them in terms of how you can add more robots very easily and quickly, or shift robots to different areas of the warehouse, or shift to different warehouses. If, for instance, we had an incident with a customer who very unfortunately had leak damage and water damage in their warehouse and had to shut down their warehouse to deal with it. We were able to, within days, take those robots and move them to another warehouse to fulfill orders from. And so just that balance of efficiency, we think that collaborative robots and Six Rivers robots, in particular, allow operators to deal very effectively with unforeseen events and still perform at very high efficiency levels.
And now a quick break to hear from our sponsor, Supply Chain Mavens. The past year has been full of fascinating and complex supply chain news, from shortages and forecasting challenges to issues with COVID-19 test components to the never-before-seen speed to market of the vaccine. In the past year, logistics and supply chain professionals like you have been nothing short of miracle workers. Supply Chain Mavens helps your team to continuously improve by developing tailored training solutions to enhance your team's competencies so they can successfully work across all aspects of supply chain. They offer exam preparation for the coveted APICS, certified in logistics, transportation, and distribution designation, as well as education in topics across the supply chain. Visit them at supplychainmavens.net/new warehouse to learn how they can help you advance your team's performance. That's supplychainmavens.net/new warehouse. Now back to the show. Interesting. Yeah. I think the one thing, that's kind of remained true as I've learned more about Six Rivers is the flexibility of the robots themselves, and, being able to tweak things, as you mentioned, regarding safety, whereas, maybe they can't be in the same area at the same time to help with social distancing and things of those nature. And even the flexibility that you just mentioned where, they had water damage and they had to move them to a different facility to keep up with their demand, is really a great thing. And the fact that you can replicate that as well virtually before putting it into motion is a huge deal, I think, because a lot of times, we try to tweak things, but maybe there's not the option to do that without really doing it. And then maybe it just goes horribly wrong. And you just, totally ruin, productivity, and there's not that balance. So it's definitely interesting to see. And I think that flexibility is a key. And, we're talking about productivity, and we've mentioned kind of the peaks of COVID and the pandemic throughout the last year, and some of the, there's a lot of unexpected peaks as well in there. So as we kind of get into prep time for peak season this year, 2021, what types of things do you think robot vendors are doing to help support fulfillment centers? And do you think it's going to be much like last year as well, or do you think we're going to get to a little more normalcy?
Oh, Kevin, what is normal?
Who knows anymore?
I think honestly, normalcy is change. It just, we don't know, right? I think, but the good news is we're all talking about it in April, right? As opposed to, kind of August and scrambling. Mm-hmm. So I think we can count on change being the driving factor, as well as I do think we can count on, again, this year, even if COVID happens to, is in more of a controlled and vaccines are more pervasive and people feel safer going out and doing physical shopping. I do think that customers have gotten addicted to the ease of online ordering. Oh, yeah. And so we should count on that. That's not going to go away. Everything that I've read and lots of data studies, I'm sure you've shared in earlier different, podcasts, state that we've accelerated the growth of online shopping, but it may not accelerate as quickly, but it's going to continue to grow, which is wonderful news, right? But also a big challenge. So I think we should count on the fact that this year's peak is going to be bigger than last year's. And one thing that robot vendors obviously should be working with customers to do is to understand what that volume looks like, when it's going to come, and start to plan in additional, robots to deal with that peak. Another thing that is very important that we work with our customers to do is to say, with that additional volume comes additional robots, can come additional challenges around congestion. Right. So we want to make sure that we actually work with customers to say, okay, where is your inventory going to be allocated in the warehouse so that we can actually spread the inventory around the warehouse to avoid congestion, so that additional volume doesn't come with the additional downside of bottlenecks in the system.
Right.
So that's a really important one. You when you're picking with robots, you actually have a different inventory strategy than you would if you're manual picking, and we can help advise what that should look like to minimize bottlenecks. And I guess a last call out would be, we and other robot companies want to make sure that obviously if a robot has an issue and it's not something that can be fixed through simply software upgrade, that we can quickly swap out and get a new functional robot to you very, very quickly to deal with either an issue, a hardware issue that the robot isn't functional, or maybe you've underestimated your peak volume, and we can actually just get you very quickly additional capacity through additional robots often within 48 hours.
Interesting. Yeah. It's good to know that you can get it in 48 hours so quickly, especially when you're in peak, because it kind of never stops. So you need to keep going. So I want to talk a little bit about that bottleneck that you're mentioning about the difference between essentially your slotting plan when you're manually picking versus when you're picking with robotics. So you mentioned in there that you would want your inventory, basically your high movers, to be more spread out, so there's less congestion. So is the system that works with Chuck, is that essentially making recommendations on where to slot this inventory?
We right now are working on a dynamic slotting inventory tool.
Okay.
That should be available to check my roadmap, but I think later this year. In the interim, however, we definitely work more with customers on a more kind of inventory strategy and recommendations for saying, hey, if you have a fast mover, or if you are coming up to a replan situation for this product, here's where what zone we would recommend you putting it into, because of what we've seen from the pick path of the previous orders that we fulfilled for that product. So we're getting smarter and smarter about being able to give dynamic recommendations for that through replenishment and initial put away, because it is such an important ingredient, one of many levers that you can pull to just continually optimize the system. Because Chuck can travel autonomously, i.e. without a person incurring labor to accompany the Chuck from the final pick to a pack out station, it's absolutely, it's okay if the pack out station is actually a little farther away from the final pick, because the picker can make the final pick. The robot can travel autonomously to that pack out, to that takeoff location at pack out, and the picker can just turn around and start picking right away again, right? So that distance, we want to minimize the distance that Chuck is traveling when it's accompanied by a picker, because that's clearly the valuable labor time that is being consumed. But when Chuck can travel autonomously is when we're happy for it to do so, and that's what we try and optimize for.
Okay, very interesting, and I'd definitely be looking forward to that automated slotting recommendation software. I forget, what did you call it? Is it going to be called?
Inventory optimization,
Inventory optimization software, yeah. So I'll definitely be looking forward to it. I think that's really cool. I do a lot of slotting myself in my day work. So I'm always interested to hear about the different strategies there and other tools that can be utilized for that. It's interesting a different perspective of doing it with robotics, and it makes total sense, as you mentioned, because with the manual picking and slotting, you typically were targeting making sure those high movers are closest to the pack station. But I totally get what you're saying about the congestion for the robots, and then also it doesn't necessarily matter because it's not a picker that's traveling to the pack station. They're not wasting time traveling. They can just go to the next order right away. So really interesting insight there. So we talked a lot about, changes in, how robots are being used. And I think, with the pandemic, people are finding different uses for robotics. I just mentioned, cleaning robotics that are out there. But do you think that the use for robots will start to just kind of, maybe trail off? Or do you think that there will still be people finding different ways to utilize these robots, since hopefully we're going out of the pandemic and out of all this stuff? Or do you think that there will still be kind of that push to find changes? Because the pandemic really was like kind of a catalyst for a lot of innovation and trying to use things in a different way. So do you think that kind of motivation will still continue, or do you think it'll be a little bit back to normal?
I don't think it'll be back to normal. I genuinely don't. I think customers have had a taste of what being in control is and what that feels like, and they like it, right? I mean, I think what we've all experienced in the pandemic is that we want to be mindful of how we spend our time and what is really valuable to us all. And many customers will feel that actually shopping in stores is not a valuable use of their time, and that they would rather have something delivered to them, or they'd rather go and quickly pick it up themselves. So in short, I think the demand for an omni-channel experience for customers is not going away at all. Right. And actually, I think it'll continue to evolve, right? I mean, because if we had been having this discussion 2-3 years ago, we would have really said, oh my God, same day or next hour delivery. That'll never happen.
Yeah.
Right. And look, it's here. And so I don't know. I wish I could get out my crystal ball and say, here's what the next version of the omnichannel experience will be, or what the customer demand will drive us all to want to be able to do for them. But there's something coming, right? And so I think, and the fact that automation and robotics can make those experiences more efficient and often better executed means that there's going to be a role for robotics, either actual robotics and robots themselves, or just smarter software, as we talked about earlier, to make fulfillment everywhere and anywhere easier. Is we're just beginning to imagine what that will look like. I think the fact that urban centers are changing and the way that buildings are going to change from retail locations or office locations to something different means that, who knows, could you imagine fulfilling orders from a formerly known as office building?
Right.
Definitely. Right. And so what does that mean for automation and robotics? It means that we need to be thinking about vertical spaces. We need to be thinking about space efficient ways of doing things, low capital cost ways of doing things at smaller scale, but yet are still efficient. So, but we've done it before, right? We faced these challenges in warehouses before. And so I really use the analogy, it's just stretching our imagination and stretching our products in different directions, but still based off of the core fundamentals of efficiency, quality, flexibility, because we're going to have to lean into those even harder in some of these environments as they become fulfillment locations for us in the future.
Definitely, yeah. And I think the key that you mentioned there is the flexibility, like we said before, and going into all these different applications. And it's interesting because the last time I talked to Fergal, we were talking about micro fulfillment and utilizing some of these existing spaces to get closer to the customer, and making it more cost effective and efficient is certainly going to call for some type of automation and robotics there. So it'd be really interesting to see how it develops. And I think that, robots are just going to become that catalyst to make things more feasible and more cost effective to help meet what consumers want now. And, consumers, as you said, are very needy and pesky, and they want things all different types of way. No, I can't say, many consumers are alike. Some people like to use one service a certain way, and some people like to use another service a certain way. So everybody has their own preference. And I think that, having these flexible options for fulfilling those needs is certainly going to drive the change and be able to meet what consumers are expecting. And I'm sure, like you said, 2-3 years ago, we're talking about next day or 1 hour delivery is kind of no way. And now, I'm sure 2 or 3 years from now, we're going to be saying like, oh my God, remember we were saying that, 1 hour delivery was fast. Now it's like, I got it in 10 minutes or something like that. Exactly. It's going to be crazy. So,
what I would say, and just an example of that would be, here I live in the Northeast. Winters can be brutal. We are not, how great and how could a customer not want a robot to bring the order right to their trunk, and all they have to do is pop the trunk, and maybe even have the robot put the order right in the trunk, or at least just pop the trunk and then grab it off the robot instead of them having to go into store, right? So little things like that are just so close within our grasp of being able to do, and it's a win for customers, right? But what I would also say is I think there's a little bit of humanizing what robots do in stores, because yes, you see robots running around doing stock take, but sometimes I've personally been in store and seen some customers getting a little frustrated with robots getting in their way, right? Getting to the mayonnaise and blocking the aisle for them. I think what will really help drive adoption of robots in a kind of in a live store environment, or just out there as part of our personal lives more, is if we can help customers see that what the robot is doing is actually helping someone they know. And I don't mean personally know, but what I mean by that is during COVID, we had some robots that were helping live grocery orders being picked in stores for people who couldn't come to store because they were too afraid or they were ill. And so I think if we can help customers understand that those robots are helping their neighbor, their grandmother, their friend, it will help them get over kind of any frustration or fear around this being around robots and humanizing them and really turning them into something that is a very useful service for a community.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. And I think even, the way that they look too, I think is important as well. They look friendly, and like Chuck seems, approachable, and I mean, Chuck is a great name too to help humanize, right? So yeah. So really, really good insights and points there, and I really appreciate you coming on the show to talk to me and give us a little different perspective from Six River as well, and also talk about all these really interesting things that are happening. It's certainly been a year for total change and innovation in all types of industries and spaces, especially in the retail environment and fulfillment environment. So Gillan, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. How can people find out more information about Six River Systems?
Very easily. First of all, thanks for having me, Kevin. It's been great. I love talking about this, and I love talking about the challenges that we're all facing together, and we're here to really, help customers capitalize on them. And so you can find out a ton about Six Rivers by going to our website, sixriversystems.com. And we're also, just a shout out, we're hiring. So anyone who's interested in getting into this space and being a product manager or helping us, design the next robots for the future, we'd love to hear from you. We're always interested in people who are passionate about robotics and making robots make the world a better place.
Okay, great news. And if you hear about that and you get referred, say that the new warehouse sent you to get a job at Six River.
We love it.
All right, so I'll put all those links on the newwarehouse.com as well. So Gillan, thanks again for your time.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.